Hello everyone, I am CA of Preet and welcome back to my channel Being CA with Preet. In my last video, we have covered first 4 points of LFAR. In case you have missed it, please check it out. I'll share the link for that video in my description box. In today's video, we are going to cover the most crucial, most extensive part of LFAR, that is advances. Advances covers both fund-based and non-fund-based credit facilities issued by the bank. Under advances, there are total 7 points. So yes, this video is gonna be extensive as there are lots of sub-points under these 7 points and we are going to cover them all. So stay tuned and watch till end. Without wasting any further time, let's begin with point number 1. But before that, please subscribe to my channel Being CA with Preet in case you haven't subscribed to it yet. So let's begin with point number 1. The first point asks for the list of all accounts examined during the bank audit. For audit of advances, the most important thing is to obtain a jotting report from the bank manager. Now, what is a jotting report? It is basically a report generated by bank system which shows list of all the advances along with the other details like sanction limit, type of loan, account number, account balance, etc. If possible, this report should be obtained before starting the actual audit so that we can understand the nature and the quantum of advances of that branch. Along with the jotting report, there are some other reports also generated in bank through which you can verify the underlying assets and securities against the credit facilities issued. Both these reports can help us in selecting samples for verification. In regard to the first point, we have to verify all large advances of that branch. As per the revision in RBI guidelines, large advances are those in respect of which the outstanding amount is in excess of 10% of outstanding aggregate balance of fund-based and non-fund-based advances of that branch, or 10 crores, whichever is less. Even in case if you have got a smaller branch, then also you need to cover the top 5 largest advances of that branch because we have to report on them specifically in point E subclause 9. Also, while choosing samples, just ensure that connected advances under same company or group are selected simultaneously and should cover all types of facilities so that we can report under other points of advances. The details of all such samples verified by us has to be given in Annexure 2 of LFAR. Now, what is credit appraisal? It is actually a process of appraising the credit worthiness of an applicant for a loan. It is a process to gauge the credibility of the borrower, his repayment capacity, past and existing loans, etc. While auditing the advances, we need to ensure that the bank has complied with all the guidelines issued by HO on the following key issues. If there is any deviation, same should be commented. For example, in regard to loan application, an auditor should examine whether the appropriate forms as prescribed by the corporate office are being obtained according to the nature and limit of the loan. While verifying advances, we need to check whether the loan application was signed or not, whether the photograph of the applicant was there in the file or not. And then we should keep a note of all these things in our records to report it further wherever required. Now, with regard to preparation of proposals, we need to verify whether in appraisals important information of the borrower have been commented by the branch officials or not, whether they have checked that all the primary and collateral securities are in order and fully insured, whether they have verified the business information of the borrower, whether they have obtained 3 years financial statements from the borrower or not. For example, if a person is applying for a loan to buy a machinery, then the bank at the time of appraisal should check whether that machinery is actually required for that type of business. It should also compare the costing from other vendors also. So in these cases, When we are verifying the advances, we can check the bills of machinery provided by the borrower at the time of taking the loan. We can cross-check the information of the supplier by verifying his credentials like his GST number, his company registration number, etc. to ensure that the bills are not fake and the loan has been given to a genuine borrower. In case of suspicion, as an auditor, we should check whether the end use of loans was verified by the bank officials or not. If it is not done, then we should take it into our records. Now, regarding documentation in credit appraisal, an auditor should verify whether all legal documents as prescribed in bank and as per the sanction letter have been taken, executed and completely filed. In case of any deviation in above points, the same has to be reported in Annexure 3 with proper remarks. Now moving forward to quick mortality cases. As the name suggests, these are those cases which have become NPA within a period of 12 months. We can check such accounts from NPA list generated by the bank. We can apply the formula to find the duration of loan using account open date and the NPA date. If that period is less than 12 months, then those are quick mortality cases. We can also cross-check this with the branch manager. If there are any such cases found, then those are to be reported in Annexure 4. Further in this point, it asks about the interest rates. In our test check, we can compare the rates mentioned in the sanction letter with the rates in jotting report. This can help us to know that the rates are correctly fed in the system or not. Further, in case you have come across such advances wherein the branch manager has done frequent rollovers, then those cases are to be reported in Annexure 5 under Clause 5 of Credit Appraisal. Under credit appraisal, it also asks whether the correct and valid credit rating was fed into system or not. So for this, we need to check the advances to which the credit rating is applicable. Then we can check the credit rating from the jotting report and then take out the master of that particular account and check in it. This way, we can report the cases where the same is not available in the system. So this is all about point B, credit appraisal. Under this point, Clause 1 asks whether the credit facilities were sanctioned beyond the delegated authority. With regard to this point, as an auditor, we need to check with the branch manager the limit allowed to him to sanction any loan. While auditing advances, if we come across any such credit facility that is sanctioned beyond that limit, then the same has to be taken in our records and also be reported under this clause. Also, for such cases, we need to know what action has been taken by the branch manager, whether the same was promptly reported by them to the senior management, and also ask for evidences of the same. Clause 2 of Sanction and Disbursement inquires about the advances which are disbursed without complying term and condition of sanction. For example, let's say if in a sanction letter it's mentioned that the borrower has to submit the loan application, previous year's financial statements, letter for end use of loan, security documents, insurance policy, etc. And if any such document is not submitted or is not found in the file while test checking of advances, then the same has to be reported in Annexure 7 of LFAR. Although cases found here might also form part of annexure under credit appraisal or documentation point, but we should try and cover more loan accounts so that we can give unique information under all points. Then comes the third and last clause of Sanction and Disbursement, which asks about the loans given for buyback of securities. We need to understand the bank policies and RBI guidelines regarding the same, that whether that branch is permitted to provide loan for buyback of securities. We should also cross-check the same with the branch manager. Under documentation, firstly, LFAR inquires about all those facilities released by the branch without execution of all necessary documents. For any loan to be released, Proper documentation is a must. It is basically the backbone of advances. Examples of documents required for sanction and disbursement of any loan includes proof of residence, proof of identity, copy of PAN card, photograph of the borrower, latest bank statements, salary slips of the borrower, copies of all property related documents, certified financial statements, latest income tax returns, insurance copies, etc. If any such document is not available in the cases examined by us, then we are required to give details of such cases under clause 1st of documentation in Annexure 8. Further, while auditing of advances, if we come across any deficiency regarding registration of charges with ROC or with Central Registry, also known as SERSI, or if in any case guarantees were to be obtained but the bank has failed to obtain those guarantees, then those deficiencies shall be reported under clause 2nd of documentation. In the 3rd clause, it asks the auditors to give details of such advances where loan was given against deposits but the lien on the same was not marked on the deposits. While auditing, if we come across any such advances where the lien is not marked, then the same has to be reported in Annexure 10th of LFAR. This completes point D of advances. Now let's move to point E. Point E is all about review, monitoring and supervision of advances. Firstly, it asks about the periodic review of advances. For this, we have to ask for the list of accounts which are overdue for review, renewal during the period of bank audit. From this list, we can report those accounts which are overdue for a period of 3 to 6 months or over 6 months in Annexure 11 and in Annexure 11A respectively. During our verification of advances, if we find any such account where the review or renewal is pending, which is not in the list given by the bank, then we have to report those accounts also in the said annexure. We can also ask for the reason why such accounts did not come up in the list given by them. In clause 2, we have to report whether the stock or book debt statements, financial statements or any other operational data was obtained regularly from the borrower or not. During our test check, if we find any case where any such data was not received from the borrower, then we need to report those cases under this point. Also, we need to calculate drawing power in all such cases where it is applicable and then cross-check with the calculations done by bank. In case of any variation, report it under clause 2nd of this point. Further, we need to inquire for those cases where the stock audit is applicable. And in those cases, we need to check whether the bank is complying with all the required guidelines, whether it has received stock audit reports on a regular basis or not. With regard to those cases where the stock audit was done but no action was taken by bank on its adverse features, then we need to report those cases in Annexure 12 of LFAR. Moving further to the 4th clause, which asks about the advances given to such non-corporate entities beyond a certain limit above which the bank has to comply with prescribed guidelines. For this, we need to verify loan files of such non-corporate entities to check whether the duly audited accounts were obtained by the bank or not. Such document deficiency are to be reported under Annexure 13th of LFAR. Clause 5 under point E talks about the advances given under consortium or multiple banking arrangements. For this, we need to inquire whether there is any such case in our branch. And if it's there, then we need to ask for due diligence report of that borrower. In case our audit branch is not the lead bank in such arrangement, then we need to ask them to call for a copy of such report from the lead bank. If that copy is made available for our review, then we are not required to report under Annexure 14. Now comes clause 6, which is all about inspection and physical verification of the securities charged to bank. Banks usually have to first inspect the property at the time of disbursement of loan, and then after disbursement they need to do the physical verification every 3 years. This period might vary on case-to-case basis or bank-to-bank basis. For this, we need to check the latest inspection report or the last physical verification report to verify that the bank is regularly complying with such guidelines. If the same is not carried out by the bank in the set timelines, then we will have to report the same under this clause. Further, in cases where physical verification is done on time but the value of that security is now substantially deteriorated as per the latest valuation report, then such cases are to be reported under Annexure 15 of LFAR. In clause 7th of point E, we have to give details in Annexure 16 regarding all those cases where we have observed frequent and unauthorized overdrawing beyond the allowed limits, cases where the insurance cover taken by the borrower against the security is inadequate, and where the value of securities is not sufficient to cover the credit facilities given by the bank. For clause 8, we need to inquire for presence of red flagged accounts. If there are any such accounts, then we need to audit the account statement of such borrowers to look for any sign of early warning signals. Also, we need to check whether the bank is complying with all the guidelines related to red flagged accounts. In case of deviations, the same has to be reported under Annexure 17. Moving to clause 9, which require us to comment on adverse features found significant in the top 5 standard advances. As I have discussed this already in the start of the video, that while choosing samples for audit of advances, we need to include top 5 standard advances in our sample list. So whatever adverse remarks we have found in the audit of those top 5 advances, we need to report them under this clause in Annexure 18. Now for the last clause under point E, we need to inquire whether the bank is into some lease financing activities. If it is carrying any such activity, then whether it has complied with all the required guidelines in regard to asset inspection, security creation, insurances, etc. In case the branch has failed to comply any of such guidelines, then the same has to be reported under Annexure 19 of LFAR. This completes point E under advances. Point F is the most important part under advances. In this point, we have to comment upon asset classification and provisioning of advances. On the basis of reports generated and provided by bank and our audit findings, we need to check whether assets have been classified properly into standard, substandard, doubtful and loss assets. Under standard category, assets are divided into SMA 0, SMA 1 and SMA 2. SMA stands for Special Mention Accounts. This is relatively a new asset category created to identify the potential stress in the accounts. SMAs are categorized in terms of duration. For example, if the principal or interest payment is not overdue for more than 30 days, then it is a case of SMA 0. Similarly, if the overdue period is between 31 to 60 days, then that will be classified as SMA 1. On the other hand, if that overdue is between 61 to 90 days, that will make an asset SMA 2. Keeping this in mind, we need to verify that the bank is following the system of classifying the accounts into SMA 0, 1 and 2 category. If there is any deviation found in classification of advances with regard to our audit findings, then the same has to be reported in Annexure 20 of LFAR. Under the first clause, we further need to report the cases where we have marked MOC, that is Memorandum of Changes, to change the classification and provisioning done by branch. It further asks for the accounts which have outstanding balance in excess of 10 CR, that whether they are downgraded or upgraded with regard to their classification during the year. Detail of such accounts and the reason thereof for their downgradation or upgradation are to be reported in Annexure 21. We have to also comment upon that whether the guidelines related to income recognition and provisioning are followed by bank or not. We have to comment here on the basis of our audit opinion and findings. Now clause 2 talks about the accounts restructured and rephased during the year. We have to verify whether there are any accounts restructured during the year. If yes, whether the RBI guidelines on the same are followed by the bank. For example, as per the RBI circular dated 1st January 2019, if MSME loans are to be restructured by the bank, then they need to ensure the following things first. Point number 1. Total exposure to borrower does not exceed 250 million as on 1st January 2019. Second, borrower account should be a standard asset as on 1st January 2019. Third, the borrowing entity is GST registered on the date of implementation in case it is not exempt from the same. Lastly, the restructuring of the borrower account is implemented as on before 31st March 2020. Although this date was extended later on by separate RBI circulars. Clause 2 also asks about the resolution for stressed asset as per the RBI circular dated 6th August 2020. For this, we need to take the copy of board resolutions and board approved policies in regard to stressed asset to ensure that the same has been implemented and complied by the bank. For third clause, we need to check for any upgradations in NPA accounts. And if there is any such upgradation, then whether the same is backed up by proper documentation and evidences. If not, then we will have to comment on the same under this clause. Clause 4th and 5th is about recovery from the borrowers. If we come across any such cases where the RBI has authorized legal action for recovery but the bank has not taken any action, then all those cases are to be reported under Annexure 22 of LFAR. Similarly, if in any case IBC process was mandated but not initiated by the bank, or cases where against any borrower IBC is already initiated, then all such cases are to be reported under Annexure 23. Moving further to Clause 6, it is all about credit guarantees like ECGC and others. For this point, we need to verify those loan accounts which are government-backed up loans and whether during the year any such loan was defaulted by the borrower. If yes, then whether the bank has lodged the claim for the same in the stipulated time period, are the claims settled by the government, whether any such claims are rejected during the year, and if rejected, is the provisioning done for the same? We have to report about all these things in Annexure 24 under this clause. For Clause 7th, we need to comment in Annexure 25 that whether the bank has obtained valuation reports against immovables charged in respect of NPAs once in every 3 years. We have to report here on the basis of our audit findings. Now coming to Clause 8, it asks about the details of cases related to write-off and compromise or settlement. For this, we need to inquire for the cases where compromise or write-off was done during the year. If there are any such cases found, then in those cases whether the bank has complied with the RBI guidelines. Further, if such instances involve write-off or waiver of more than 50 lakhs, then we have to report the same under Annexure 26. Clause 9 under this point asks about the execution of decrees obtained for recovery of advances. For this clause, we need to ensure that the branch is executing all such decrees promptly. Also, we have to give age-wise analysis of decrees and pending execution in Annexure 27. For Clause 10th, we need to verify that the recoveries are properly appropriated against principal and interest accounts. We can verify the same by checking NPA accounts and interest receivable account of the borrower. During the audit, if we have asked for any document which was held at centralized office of the bank, then whether we have got the copy of the same or not. If not, then the exceptions are to be reported under clause 11 of this point. Clause 12, the last clause under this point, asks about the major deficiencies in credit review, monitoring and supervision. As per our audit findings, we need to report all such deficiencies in Annexure 28. This is all about clauses under classification and provisioning of advances. With regard to this point, we need to ask for the list of LCs and BGs invoked during the year, and then report the details of such borrowers under Annexure 29 of LFAR. For cases where the LCs or BGs were invoked but not paid, they are to be reported in Annexure 30 with the amount due. Also, if on inquiry we come to know about instances where fund-based facilities were converted to non-fund-based facility or vice versa, post invocation of LC and BG, then those instances are to be reported in Annexure 31 of LFAR. This is all what we have to report under point G, non-fund based facilities. Now we have covered all 7 points of advances. I hope the word advances won't scare you now during the bank audit. If you really find this video useful and knowledgeable, please give it a like and do share it with your colleagues. And don't forget to subscribe to my channel Being CA with Preet. Bye bye.